The coldest kind of hunger is not the one that twists inside the stomach. It is the one that teaches a person to stand in a bright room and disappear politely while people with keys decide whether dignity is an approved expense. Gloria Brooks learned that lesson at 72 years old beneath the flickering lights of the East Mercy Community Center on the night the rain turned the sidewalks silver and the city declared its emergency warming shelters at capacity. She stood alone beside a dented stainless steel soup pot with both hands resting on the stove rail and watched steam rise like a fragile prayer into the empty kitchen. Chicken bones, celery, carrots, onion skins, a bay leaf she had saved for months. Everything she could stretch had gone into that pot. Everything she had planned to eat through Sunday had become broth. Outside the windows, the parking lot glistened under the streetlights. Wind drove cold rain against the glass. The weather report had called it the lowest temperature in 11 years. The county alert had told people to stay indoors. Gloria had read the message twice on her old phone and then looked at the folding tables in the dining hall and thought of men sleeping under overpasses with military patches sewn onto jackets that no longer kept out the weather. Can you imagine standing in a kitchen with almost nothing left and still feeling that the little you have belongs to somebody colder than you? That was what Gloria felt. Not heroism, not drama, not the sweet music people put under stories like this when they want kindness to look easy. She felt the precise arithmetic of poverty. 2 cans on the shelf, half a bag of rice, dry pasta sealed with a rubber band, $7.38 in her purse, a Social Security deposit 12 days away, an electric bill folded beside the microwave, and 34 veterans waiting on the other side of a swinging kitchen door because the city had cut the overnight meal allocation from the center the week before and called it temporary stabilization. Gloria did not know how to translate temporary stabilization into a language that would fill a bowl. So she stirred. She salted carefully. She tasted the broth with the edge of a spoon and closed her eyes as if she could ask the soup to become larger through tenderness alone. The East Mercy Community Center had once been a church annex, then a neighborhood pantry, then a warming site, then a public-private service partner. That last phrase had arrived with laminated signs. New intake forms, new ID rules, new security cameras, new compliance binders, new staff from Meridian Civic Services, a nonprofit contractor with sleek emails, and a director named Preston Vale who never came to the kitchen unless a donor was present. Gloria was not staff. She was officially listed as a volunteer kitchen aide. Unofficially, she was the person everyone called when the heat failed, when the pantry shipment was late, when a veteran arrived shaking too hard to write his name, when a mother needed formula, when someone had to unlock the door because rules did not know what frostbite looked like. She had buried her husband, Albert, 14 years earlier. He had served in Vietnam and returned with a limp he joked about and a silence he did not. After he died, Gloria began cooking twice a week for former service members because grief needed somewhere to put its hands. Over time, the men stopped calling her Mrs. Brooks and started calling her Miss Gloria. She never corrected them. Respect did not need a title. It needed consistency. At 6:13, that evening the first veteran arrived. Then another. Then 5 more. The rain had soaked their shoulders. Their shoes squeaked on the old tile. Their faces carried that careful look poor people learn when entering buildings run by forms. The look that asks, how small should I make myself so nobody send me back outside? Gloria pushed through the kitchen door with a stack of bowls against her chest and smiled at them with the full warmth of a woman who understood that welcome is a kind of shelter. Coming out of that cold. Sit where you like. Coffee will be ready in a minute. The men moved slowly at first. They chose chairs near walls. They set wet backpacks beneath tables. Some kept their coats on. Some lowered their eyes when Gloria greeted them by name because being remembered can hurt when the world has trained you to expect erasure. Earl with the tremor. Marcus with the old Marine cap. Theo, who always asked about Albert, though they had never met. Leonard, who carried every document he owned in a plastic grocery bag. A young man named Darius, who had served in Afghanistan and still flinched when the radiator knocked. Then a man Gloria did not recognize entered without hurry. He was tall but slightly bent by age. Silver hair cut close. Brown coat patched at the elbow. Eyes clear enough to make the room feel observed. He signed the warming log in neat block letters and sat at the back table beneath the bulletin board where Meridian had posted a new notice that Red Food Service may be limited based on funding availability. He did not speak to anyone. He folded his hands. He watched. Gloria noticed him only because loneliness has a temperature and has seemed colder than the rain. She brought coffee first. Not the thin, institutional kind Meridian supplied when the boxes came on time. Her own coffee, bought with coupons, brewed strong, poured into foam cups she had found in the storage closet behind broken holiday decorations. When she set one before the silver-haired man, he looked up and studied her face for half a second longer than most people did. "Thank you, ma'am." His voice was low, careful, educated perhaps, or simply worn smooth by years of holding himself together. Gloria nodded. "Warm your hands first. Soup is coming." She went back to the kitchen and did not see him look through the open doorway at the pantry shelves. Did not see his eyes stop on the nearly empty bag of rice. Did not see him glance at the red Meridian inventory clipboard hanging beside the freezer. Did not see him take in details the way a man takes in a room when he has spent a life measuring danger before naming it. By 6:47, there were 34 veterans inside. The community center windows fogged from breath and steam. Gloria carried the pot to the serving line herself because the rolling cart will have been broken for months and Preston had marked the repair request as non-essential. She lifted the ladle and served the first bowl to Earl. His hands shook so badly that she steadied the bowl without making him feel steadied. She gave Marcus extra carrots because he liked them. She slipped Darius 2 pieces of bread because you should not look that hollow. Each bowl lowered the soup. Each scoop emptied her week. Each thank you landed softly inside her chest and made the sacrifice feel less like loss and more like order restored. Then the front door opened hard enough to slap the wall. Cold air swept through the room. Preston Vale stepped in wearing a camel coat that had never seen a bus stop. Beside him stood Renee Slade, Meridian Civic Services Regional Compliance Manager, a woman with polished hair, narrow glasses, and a tablet held upright like a weapon. Behind them came a uniformed security officer contracted through the building. His name tag said Walsh. Gloria saw the room change before anyone spoke. Shoulders tightened, cups lowered. Men who had been laughing went quiet. The silver-haired veteran at the back did not move. Preston removed leather gloves one finger at a time and looked at the crowded tables as if he had discovered damage. "Mrs. Brooks." He did not call her Gloria when others were listening. "Why is the facility operating beyond the approved service threshold?" Gloria held the ladle above the pot. "Because it is freezing outside. Because they are hungry. Because there is still soup." Renee tapped her tablet. The scheduled emergency meal service was suspended pending vendor reconciliation. Any food distributed outside approved procurement channels creates liability exposure. Gloria looked at the bowls already in front of the men. Liability exposure sounded very different from hunger. She set another bowl on the counter. A veteran reached for it and then hesitated. Preston saw the hesitation and seemed pleased. No more service until intake status is verified. Gloria turned her eyes to him. Her voice stayed gentle. "These men signed in. Some of them come every week. The rule changed yesterday." Renee slid one finger across her tablet. "A valid government-issued photo ID is required for warming access after 6:30. Veterans without current identification must be referred to county screening." Several men stared down at the table. Gloria knew what that meant. County screening was 3 bus transfers away, closed by 5, worthless in the rain. She also knew half the men in the room had lost wallets, had documents stolen, had discharge papers in storage units they could not pay for, had names misspelled in systems built by people who slept indoors. Preston stepped closer to the serving line. "Mrs. Brooks, put down the ladle." The room inhaled without sound. Gloria looked at the ladle, then at the pot, then at the 34 men whose eyes had found the floor. What would you do in that moment? Would you argue with the man who controlled the contract? Would you shout at the woman holding policy in her hands? Or would you understand that sometimes silence is not surrender, but a way of letting cruelty speak clearly into the record. Gloria placed the ladle on the tray. Softly, precisely. Metal touched metal. Renee nodded as if compliance had been achieved. Then she began moving between tables. Name, ID, service affiliation, proof of veteran status. Each phrase landed like a door closing. Earl fumbled through his coat pockets. Marcus produced an expired VA card, and Renee held it between two fingers like contaminated evidence. Leonard unfolded papers from his plastic bag, while rainwater dripped from his sleeve onto the floor. Darius said his wallet had been stolen at the shelter 2 weeks ago. Renee told him verbal claims could not be accepted. Preston watched Gloria instead of the man. That was when she understood something about him that she had tried not to understand for years. He did not only want the rules followed. He wanted her to see that his rules were stronger than her mercy. He wanted the room to learn who possessed permission. The silver-haired veteran sat still at the back table. His bowl was untouched. His eyes moved from Renee to Preston to the security camera in the corner. Then to Gloria. Not pleading, not warning, recording. Walsh, the security officer, shifted near the door. Uncomfortable perhaps, but present. Preston raised his voice only enough for everyone to hear. This center is not a soup kitchen for undocumented walk-ins. Gloria felt the sentence pass through the room like cold water. Undocumented. Vulcans. Men who had worn uniforms for a country now being reduced to a risk category beneath fluorescent light. She did not correct him. She did not rescue his language. She picked up a towel and wiped a drop of soup from the counter. Preston seemed irritated by her calm. Mrs. Brooks, did you purchase these ingredients personally? Yes. With authorized funds? No. Then this food cannot be distributed under Meridian Service branding. Renee added, it may also constitute an unapproved donation event. We need to document disposal. Disposal. The word found the pot. Gloria looked inside it. The soup was not much now. Enough for maybe 8 more bowls. 8 men still had not eaten. Preston leaned closer. Throw it away. Nobody breathed. Somewhere near the wall, a chair leg scraped. Darius looked up sharply and then lowered his face again. Gloria kept her hand on the towel. She felt Albert in memory. Not as a ghost. As a standard. Character reveals itself when nobody useful is watching. But somebody useful was watching. She just did not know it yet. She lifted the pot with both hands. It was still heavy enough to require effort. She carried it toward the kitchen sink. The men watched. Renee watched. Preston watched with that bloodless satisfaction of a bureaucrat who had learned that the law is easiest to misuse against people too tired to challenge it. Gloria set the pot beside the sink. Her palms burned from the metal handles. She turned on the faucet. Steam rose. She did not pour. Not yet. She stood in front of the sink and looked through the pass-through window into the dining room. 34 veterans. Vet coats. Empty bowls. Half-eaten bread. Shame settling over the tables, though none of it belonged to them. Then she looked at Preston. Are you directing me to discard privately purchased food while unsheltered veterans remain present during a weather emergency? Renee looked up from her tablet. Preston frowned. I am directing you to follow policy. Gloria nodded. Please state the policy number. Preston blinked. Renee answered instead. Emergency Food Distribution Protocol. Revised Vendor Control Memo. Section 4. Gloria nodded again. Thank you. Her voice held no sarcasm. That somehow made Renee stiffen. Gloria turned the faucet off. The room was so quiet that the dripping water sounded loud. She picked up the pot again and placed it back on the stove without serving from it. Preston gave a thin smile. Good. Now clear the dining area. Anyone without compliant identification must exit the facility. Walsh looked at the rain streaking the windows. Sir, the temperature is dropping. Preston did not look at him. That is not your determination to make. Renee added, non-compliant occupancy creates insurance exposure. Walsh swallowed. Then he moved toward the first table. Gloria folded the towel. Slowly. She did not plead. She did not raise her voice. She simply watched as protocol became a broom sweeping hungry men toward the storm. One by one they stood. Those with acceptable IDs were told they could remain in the East Hall without food service. Those without were told to leave and seek screening. The distinction was obscene. Earl, with his tremor, could stay. Darius could not. Marcus could stay only after Renee photographed his expired VA card for incident documentation. Leonard could not because his papers were damp and unofficial. The silver-haired man at the back reached into his coat and removed a state ID. Renee glanced at it. Accepted. He could stay. He did not. He stood with the others. Renee told him he had clearance. He looked at her and said softly, "I know." Then he picked up his backpack and walked toward the exit with Darius and Leonard and the men protocol had chosen to abandon. Gloria met his eyes as he passed. There was something in them now. Not gratitude, not sadness, a terrible focus. He paused beside the serving line. "That soup smelled like home." Gloria answered, "It still does." Preston heard and turned sharply. "No further distribution." Gloria nodded. "Of course." The silver-haired man stepped into the rain. By 7:59, the room had emptied by half. The remaining men sat in a silence worse than hunger. Preston instructed Gloria to sanitize all surfaces and log the incident before leaving. Renee emailed herself photos of the pot. Walsh stood by the door with his jaw tight. When Preston and Renee finally left for the administrative office, Gloria carried the pot back to the stove and stood over it. Walsh approached quietly. "Miss Gloria, I am sorry." She looked at him. "You have a phone?" "Yes, ma'am." "Call the county warming hotline. Tell them there are veterans outside this building in freezing rain because Meridian denied shelter access over documentation." Walsh hesitated. "Preston will fire me." Gloria nodded. "Maybe." He looked toward the office door. Then he took out his phone. The call placed a crack in the night. A small one. Not enough. But cracks matter. Gloria opened the back pantry and removed the last stack of paper bowls. Then she lifted the pot. Earl saw her and whispered, "Miss Gloria." She smiled at him. "Eat slowly." She carried the soup through the side kitchen door into the covered alley where Darius and Leonard and 12 others stood beneath the dripping awning because they had nowhere else to go. Rain blew sideways. Their faces turned toward her with disbelief, so naked it nearly broke her. She served them outside, bowl by bowl. No speeches, no defiance for display, just hot soup in a cold hands. The silver-haired man stood at the edge of the awning watching her give away the last of it. When his turn came, she filled his bowl and added the final piece of bread. He looked from the bread to her face. "You did not keep any for yourself." Gloria held the empty pot against her hip. "I have had enough in my life to know when someone else has not." He lowered his eyes. "That is a rare thing." She almost laughed. "No, it is just supper." He studied the empty pot. Then he said, "May I ask your full name?" Gloria felt the rain misting her cheek. "Gloria Elaine Brooks." He nodded once, as if confirming a record. "Thank you. More than you know." After the men ate, they dispersed into the storm in small groups. Walsh found room for 5 in a church basement through the hotline. 2 were picked up by a veteran outreach van. Others vanished into the city the way vulnerable people vanish when institutions close at 5. Gloria washed the pot alone after 10. The kitchen smelled of bleach and onions. The pantry shelves were nearly bare. Preston had left a printed disciplinary notice on the counter. Unauthorized food distribution. Failure to follow revised intake controls. Creating reputational and insurance risk. Mandatory review at 9 in the morning. Gloria read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her purse. She locked the center, walked home under an umbrella with a bent rib, and believed that the worst consequence would be losing access to the one place where she could still help. She did not know that the silver-haired veteran had stopped beneath the bus shelter 3 blocks away and opened a secure contact list on a phone far newer than his coat suggested. She did not know his name was Colonel Nathaniel Reed, retired Army Logistics Commander, former Deputy Director of the State Veterans Emergency Housing Authority, current Special Advisor to the Federal Office of Inspector General on misuse of veteran outreach grants. She did not know he had come to East Mercy because 3 complaints had already been filed and buried. Missing meal funds, inflated service counts, denied warming access, retaliation against volunteers. She did not know he had been asked to observe quietly before auditors decided whether the problem was sloppy management or deliberate abuse. She did not know that everything Preston did had happened in front of the worst possible witness. Nathaniel stood under the shelter with rain dripping from the roof behind him and made one call. "I found a breach." Then he listened. No, worse than the spreadsheets showed. He looked back toward the dark community center. They weaponized ID policy during an emergency weather declaration. Forced veterans outside. Ordered donated food destroyed. Retaliated against the volunteer who fed them. A pause. His face hardened. "Yes, I want the audit team at East Mercy by morning. No advance notice. Preserve the cameras before Meridian deletes them." Another pause. "And notify federal grants compliance. This is not a meal program issue anymore. This is veteran endangerment." Inside her small house, Gloria warmed water for tea because dinner was gone. She sat at her kitchen table with the disciplinary notice beside her mug and no anger in her body. Only a sadness, so old it felt almost calm. She thought of Darius holding soup with both hands. She thought of Leonard apologizing for dripping rain on the floor. She thought of Preston saying undocumented walk-ins. She thought of how easily language could be sharpened into policy and policy into exile. Then she slept in her chair without meaning to. At 5:15 the next morning, she woke with a stiff neck and the ordinary courage of people who cannot afford to spare. She put on her navy church coat, packed the disciplinary notice, took the bus to East Mercy, and arrived at 8:32 for a 9 o'clock review that Preston had scheduled to make an example of her. The center looked different in daylight. Smaller, more tired. The front windows held gray reflections of traffic. Inside the administrative office, Renee sat with her tablet. Preston sat behind the desk that had once belonged to the church pastor. A Meridian Human Resources representative had joined by video on a laptop. Her name appeared as Kendra Mills. She smiled with professional emptiness. Gloria sat in the chair they indicated. It was lower than the others. That was not an accident. Preston folded his hands. "Mrs. Brooks, we appreciate your years of volunteer engagement. However, last night showed a serious inability to comply with safety protocols." Gloria listened. Renee read from a prepared summary. Unauthorized food service. Failure to cease distribution when directed. Potential contamination liability. Encouraging non-compliant persons to remain near facility access points. Use of privately purchased food in a Meridian-controlled environment. Gloria kept her purse on her lap. Her hands rested on the clasp. She did not interrupt. Preston leaned back. "The issue is not compassion. The issue is governance." Gloria nodded once. "Governance. Yes." He seemed encouraged. "Effective immediately, your volunteer privileges are suspended pending retraining. You will no longer possess kitchen access. You will also sign this acknowledgement confirming that last night resulted from your misunderstanding of policy." He slid a paper across the desk. Gloria looked at it. The paper said she accepted full responsibility for unauthorized operations and acknowledged that Meridian staff acted in accordance with emergency safety standards. It did not mention hungry veterans. It did not mention the rain. It did not mention the order to discard food. It did not mention Darius, Leonard, the men outside. It was a document designed to make the institution innocent by making the poorest person in the room guilty. Have you ever seen someone try to turn kindness into misconduct with a single signature? Gloria had, more than once. She looked at the pen beside the paper. Then at Preston. "May I read it fully?" Renee sighed softly. "Of course." Gloria read every word. Slowly, Preston checked his watch. Kendra on the laptop said, "We do want to move toward resolution." Gloria reached into her purse and removed her own folded disciplinary notice from the night before. She placed it beside the acknowledgement. Then she asked, "Are these documents part of my official volunteer file?" Renee answered, "Yes." Gloria asked, "And the security footage from last night is retained?" Preston said, "Standard retention." Gloria looked at him. "How long?" Renee tapped the tablet. 30 days unless flagged." Gloria nodded. "Has it been flagged?" Preston smiled faintly. "That is internal." Gloria folded her hands again. "Then I cannot sign." Preston's face cooled. "Excuse me." I cannot sign a statement saying I misunderstood a policy that was never provided to me before enforcement, and I cannot say Meridian acted properly when men were sent in a freezing rain without meaningful referral. Renee's glasses caught the light. Mrs. Brooks, this tone is not helpful. Gloria's tone had not changed. I understand. Preston stood. Then your suspension is permanent. He looked toward the office door. Walsh, the security officer, appeared. His eyes avoided Gloria's. Preston pointed to the paper. Escort Mrs. Brooks from the building. She is no longer authorized on site. Gloria rose before Walsh could move. She picked up her purse. Not the documents. She left them on the desk. A small choice. A powerful one. She wanted them exactly where they were when the door opened. And the door did open. Not from the hallway. From the front entrance beyond the lobby. The sound came first. Firm footsteps. Several people. Then a woman's voice. Clear. Official. Good morning. We are looking for Preston Vale. Preston turned toward the lobby with irritation still arranged on his face. That expression lasted until he saw the badges. 3 people entered the office corridor. A black woman in a charcoal federal coat. A white man carrying a hard case. A Latina attorney with a binder sealed by blue tabs. Behind them stood Colonel Nathaniel Reed in the same patch brown coat from the night before. Only now a small federal credential hung from a leather case in his hand. The room lost oxygen. Preston's mouth opened and closed without sound. Renee's tablet lowered. Kendra on a laptop leaned toward her camera. The black woman showed her badge. Marisol Grant, Office of Inspector General, Federal and State Joint Grants Oversight. This facility receives Veteran Emergency Service funds through Meridian Civic Services. We are executing an unannounced compliance audit and preservation order. She looked at Gloria briefly, not with surprise, with recognition. Then she looked back at Preston. No one is to delete, ITA, remove, or access electronic records outside our supervision. The white man with the hard case spoke to Walsh. Please secure the camera room. Walsh looked at Preston, then at the badge. Yes, sir. Preston found his voice. I think there has been a misunderstanding. Marisol did not blink. That is what we are here to determine. Nathaniel stepped into the office. His presence was quiet but devastating. He looked at the acknowledgement paper on the desk, then at the disciplinary notice, then at Gloria. Mrs. Brooks, thank you for remaining calm. Preston's face drained. Renee stared at Nathaniel as if trying to place him. He helped her. I was the unidentified veteran seated at the back table last night. I observed the denial of service, the order to discard privately purchased food, the forced removal of veterans during a declared weather emergency, and the subsequent outdoor distribution that prevented additional harm. Silence deepened until even the laptop speaker hiss sounded loud. Preston whispered, Colonel Reed. Nathaniel nodded. Retired. Currently assisting Federal Review. Marisol opened her binder. Mr. Vale, Meridian's grant agreement requires low-barrier warming access during emergency weather activation. It requires documented referral before denial. It prohibits retaliation against volunteers or staff who report safety concerns. It also requires accurate meal and occupancy reporting. She turned a page. We have preliminary records indicating Meridian billed for 92 veteran meals last night at East Mercy. Gloria looked up. 92. There have been 34. Preston's expression tightened in panic before he smoothed it. That must be a clerical batch error. The attorney beside Marisol spoke for the first time. We will preserve the source data. Renee's hands trembled around the tablet. Marisol continued. We also have complaints alleging denial of access to veterans lacking current identification despite policy waivers tied to emergency funding. Those complaints were marked resolved by your office without outreach to complainants. Preston tried to regain authority. I will need to contact Meridian Council. Please do. The attorney handed him a card. After devices are preserved. Renee moved her thumb over her tablet screen. The white man from the audit team looked at her. Please place that on the desk. Now, she obeyed. Not because he yelled. He did not. Because certain kinds of power do not need volume. They arrive with jurisdiction. Gloria stood near the chair she had been escorted from and felt the strangeness of being protected by a system she had never expected to protect her. But protection was not the same as spectacle. There was no cheering, no instant revenge, just paperwork turning against the people who had trusted paperwork to hide them. Marisol looked at Gloria. Mrs. Brooks, we will need your account. You are not under investigation. You are a protected witness for the purpose of this review. The words moved through Gloria slowly. Protected witness, not troublemaker, not confused volunteer, not liability. Witness. Preston sat down as if his knees had decided before he did. Nathaniel placed his federal credential on the desk beside the unsigned acknowledgement. He looked at Preston. You asked her to sign away the truth 6 minutes before an audit. That may matter. Preston whispered. I was following protocol. Nathaniel's voice remained gentle. So was I. Over the next 3 hours, East Mercy changed shape. The auditors sealed the office. Downloaded camera footage. Photographed posted notices. Copied intake logs. Matched meal claims against sign in sheets. Asked Walsh for his call record to the county hotline. Interviewed the veterans who could be reached. By noon, the story was no longer about a woman in a soup pot. It was about a contractor that had accepted federal veteran support funds while narrowing access through informal ID rules. It was about inflated meal reimbursement numbers. It was about disciplinary threats against volunteers who filled gaps the grant money was supposed to cover. It was about a city that had outsourced compassion and then stopped reading the fine print. Gloria gave her statement in the chapel room because Marisol thought it would be quieter. She described the rain, the soup, the men, the order to discard food. She did not embellish. She did not call Preston cruel. She simply repeated his words exactly. Undocumented walk-ins, disposal, insurance exposure. Every phrase landed with more force because she did not sharpen it. Nathaniel sat across from her and listened with his hands folded. When she finished, he said, You understand that what you did outside may have prevented injury. Gloria looked down. I only gave them soup. He shook his head. Sometimes that is what prevention looks like before institutions admit they failed. By late afternoon, Meridian's regional headquarters had suspended Preston and Renee pending investigation. By evening, the city froze Meridian's East Mercy reimbursements. By the following week, the contract was under emergency review. But the most important changes came slower and matter more. The ID requirement was rewritten with a weather emergency waiver. Every warming site had to post denial rights in plain language. Volunteers received a protected reporting hotline outside contractor control. Meal claims had to be verified against independent logs. A veteran advisory board gained oversight seats. The kitchen repair requests Preston had dismissed as non-essential were approved within 48 hours. New wheels for the cart. A working freezer seal. Shelves that did not lean. Locks that did not trap supplies behind administrative approval. And Gloria's suspension letter was voided in writing. Not quietly. Not as a favor. Publicly. In the same board meeting where Meridian executives sat beneath recessed lights and learned that apology sounds different when the microphones are on. Gloria attended only because Nathaniel asked her. She wore her Navy church coat and carried a small notebook. The room was full of officials, lawyers, reporters, veterans, people who had never been inside East Mercy, but now spoke earnestly about community trust. Preston did not attend. Renee did not attend. Their absence told its own story. The Meridian CEO read a statement acknowledging failures in implementation. Marisol presented findings without adjectives. Nathaniel spoke last. He did not perform outrage. He described a woman standing between a policy and the people it would have harmed. Then he turned toward Gloria and said, The measure of a service system is not how elegant its rules look in a binder. It is what happens when a hungry person reaches the door in bad weather. Gloria felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She did not stand at first. Then Darius rose from the back row. Leonard rose beside him. Earl, Marcus, Walsh. One by one the room stood. Not thunderous, not cinematic, just human beings refusing to let the record stay cold. Gloria stood because remaining seated felt unkind to their kindness. She said only a few words. I hope next time the door opens faster. That sentence ran in the local paper the next morning. But the article did not capture her real victory. Her victory was not Preston losing power. It was not Renee surrendering the tablet. It was not the badge on the desk. It was Darius walking into East Mercy 2 weeks later, without current ID, and being handed a temporary intake card instead of a warning. It was Leonard getting document replacement, help at the same table where he had once been humiliated. It was Walsh accepting a full-time safety coordinator role after testifying truthfully. It was the pantry staying full because local grocers now donated under a transparent community account no contractor could reroute. It was veterans eating before paperwork when weather turned dangerous. It was the soup pot returning to the stove. On the first cold night after the audit, Gloria unlocked the kitchen and found new labels on the shelves. Chicken stock, rice, vegetables, coffee, bread. Not abundance exactly, but enough. Enough is a holy word when you have lived close to empty. She filled the large pot again. This time the cart rolled smoothly when she pushed it into the dining hall. Men sat at the tables. Some she knew, some she did not. Darius helped pour coffee. Leonard stacked bowls. Nathaniel sat at the back again by choice. No vie visible. No performance. Just an old soldier warming his hands around a cup. Gloria ladled soup into the first bowl and felt the weight of what had changed. Not everything. Never everything. Systems do not become merciful overnight because one cruel man was caught. But a door had been forced open. A rule had been rewritten. A record had been corrected. And sometimes justice begins not with fire, but with a calm woman refusing to lie. Can you imagine the silence of that office when the badge touched the desk? Can you imagine Preston realizing that every word he had used to shrink her had become evidence? Can you imagine Gloria standing there with an unsigned paper beside her and understanding that her calm had preserved the truth better than any shout could have? She served the soup slowly, bowl by bowl. Steam lifted into the room. Rain tapped against the windows again. But this time the men outside were brought in before anyone asked for a compliant document. This time the pantry behind her was not a secret shame. This time the policy binder sat on a shelf where it belonged. Useful only if it helped people live. When Nathaniel reached the serving line, Gloria placed a bowl before him and gave him an extra piece of bread. He smiled. You still give away the last piece. Gloria looked around the room. At warm hands, full bowls, open doors, and she looked back at him. No, not anymore. Now there is enough for everyone. And for the first time in years, she believed that sentence might survive the night.